I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The first time I saw her in the lobby of her building, she was crouched by the mailboxes, rearranging the flyers with a precise, impatient sort of energy. I had meant to nod politely, maybe mutter a hello. Instead, I froze, noticing how her fingers lingered on the paper edges, the faint hum of her necklace against her collarbone. Something about the way she looked up, eyes catching mine, quick and startled, made me pause in the hallway, unsure if I should move on or linger. I've been living in the building for almost 3 months now. It's small, quiet, and a little tired-looking, the walls in the stairwell peeling, the carpet stretched thin by too many footsteps. And yet, for some reason, she makes it feel like the center of the universe when she passes through. Something as mundane as the morning light hitting her hair can make me want to linger longer than I should. I see her most mornings right outside the lobby door, holding her coffee cup the same way every day. The tip of her pinky curves just slightly, like she's aware of the gesture but doesn't care. I end up staring too long, trying to figure out what it is about her that makes my chest tighten. Maybe it's the tilt of her head when she laughs softly, a sound meant for someone else, but which somehow finds me. Or maybe it's the way she remembers my order when I stop by the tiny corner cafe. A black coffee, no sugar, the lid slightly askew, just like last week. There's a rhythm to it. I pass her, we exchange a quick word, maybe a half smile, and then I retreat into the safety of my apartment, where no one expects me to act normal. I check my phone more than I'd like to admit. Messages start, never finish. A draft text to a friend, hey she, and then I stop, delete. Not because I don't want to send it, but because the words feel like stepping into someone else's private space. Her laugh, yesterday in the hallway, was soft. She had been fumbling with a package, muttering about how the tape wouldn't hold. I had tried to offer help, but my words caught somewhere in my throat, tangled in the thought of reaching for her hand, or not. She had tilted her head, smiled faintly, and said, "You don't know what this means." Just like that. No explanation. Not a joke, not a reprimand. Just a statement, hanging in the air, half inscrutable. I nodded, heart thudding, unsure if she meant the tape, the package, or something far less tangible. I caught myself flicking my eyes toward her hands without thinking. How she adjusted the strap of her bag, the slight tremor in her fingers when she bent to pick up something I hadn't even noticed fall. Small, quiet things. Things that made the air feel thicker than it should. By the time I reached my apartment, I kept seeing her smile. Quiet, fleeting, but it was enough to make the room feel empty, hollow in comparison. I leaned against the door, staring at the stack of unsent texts. One more try, one more line. I don't know what you meant, but I deleted it again. And then a ping. My phone lit up. A message from an unknown number, but the name was hers. The words on the screen made my chest seize and my fingers freeze. Can you come by for a second? It's important. I blinked. The coffee had gone cold. My thoughts paused mid-step. And I knew, somehow, that the day I thought would be ordinary wasn't going to be. I followed her up the narrow stairs, the smell of old carpet and faint laundry detergent wrapping around me. She moved ahead with a careful pace, glancing back once, just enough to catch my hesitation. Her apartment smelled faintly of chamomile and something woodsy, a combination I didn't know how to place. She motioned for me to sit on the small couch, and I did, knees slightly turned inward, hands folded. She handed me a mug without looking, and I caught the warmth of her fingers brushing mine ever so briefly. I wasn't sure if you'd come," she said. Voice soft, casual, like she was admitting something small but dangerous. "It's okay," I muttered, unsure why my throat felt tight. "I mean, I came." She smiled. Not me exactly, but somewhere in between me and the room. "I thought maybe you'd be busy. Or nervous." The words lingered. Nervous. I wanted to laugh it off, but the corner of her mouth flickered, and I realized the quiet confession wasn't just for me. She brewed tea while I shuffled on the couch, glancing at the stack of books on her coffee table. Well-thumbed paperbacks, a few with sticky notes. One title caught my eye, a memoir by a woman who had traveled alone in her 30s. I remembered my own unfinished journal, pages full of half-written thoughts I'd never dared to send anyone. "It's my ex's old teapot," she said suddenly, catching my gaze. He gave to me years ago. I keep it because she trailed off, fingers circling the handle. Because it's still useful, I guess. I nodded, unsure if I should say something. Because there was the tiny signal that she had lived a life before me, that she carried ghosts I wasn't meant to disturb. And yet, somehow, I was already imagining what it would feel like to touch her hand again, to trace that quiet line of her wrist, to hear her laugh at some imagined joke that only I could make. We sat in silence after the tea was poured, steam rising between us. I noticed how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a small, deliberate gesture that seemed to acknowledge me without words. My mind started mapping scenarios, each one forbidden, a laugh too long, a brush of hands, lingering glances. The age gap, the fact that she knew my friends, the weight of her divorce. It all piled up like warning signs I didn't know how to heed. I used to come here after work, she said finally, voice softer. Just to sit. Think. The building was quieter back then, or maybe I just noticed less. Something about the way she said it, the admission, the small vulnerability, made my chest tighten. I wanted to tell her everything I felt, but the words tangled inside me. So I didn't. I just moved my hand a fraction closer to hers, almost accidentally, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she gave me that faint, knowing smile. A tilt of the head, a glance that lasted one heartbeat too long. And suddenly, the room felt smaller, warmer, charged with things I wasn't supposed to name. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I didn't mean to linger as long as I did, but her apartment had a way of slowing everything down. The teacups were still warm, but I was barely tasting the tea. My fingers drummed lightly against the rim, not wanting to meet hers again, yet already noticing the subtle way her hand hovered near mine. She cleared her throat and shifted, brushing a stray crumb from the table. I looked away, suddenly aware of the closeness, of the space I wasn't supposed to occupy. There was something in her posture, slightly rigid, just enough to warn me off, that made my chest tighten. She wanted me here, I could feel it, but only up to a line she wasn't willing to cross. I heard the familiar creak of the building's stairs and froze. A neighbor passed, humming quietly. The sound made me retreat slightly, though I didn't move. She glanced at the door, then back at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Protection, hesitation, or a warning I didn't want to hear. I wanted to ask her something. Anything, but my words tangled. I trailed off, aware that the words sounded clumsy, unformed. My throat felt dry. I wanted to say how it was strange, the way I felt in her presence, but instead I just traced a line along the edge of the table with my fingertip. She poured another cup of tea, slow, careful, almost ceremonious. The faint clink of porcelain against the tray sounded impossibly loud. I watched the way her hair fell forward as she bent slightly, the subtle curve of her neck catching the light. I caught myself imagining what it would feel like to lean closer, to close the space. But then her eyes flicked up, meeting mine, and I drew back, heart thudding, because there was again the unspoken boundary. The apartment felt smaller, but also heavier. I could sense the quiet pulse of risk in the air. A friend might notice, someone could walk in, the line between curiosity and something more forbidden. The thought made me shift, restless. I started again, then stopped. Her gaze softened, but only slightly. Not enough. Too much. I couldn't tell. She moved a strand of hair behind her ear, the movement slow, deliberate, almost like she was signaling to me without saying anything. My hand twitched, as if it wanted to reach out. For a moment, we both leaned forward, and the air between us seemed thinner, warmer. I caught the scent of her perfume, vanilla, faint musk, and my own pulse spiked. It was one of those moments where everything might happen, and yet nothing did. Her lips were close, but not close enough. I could feel the hesitation in her, in me, the knowledge that the gap between wanting and doing was enormous and dangerous. I opened my mouth to say something, admit something, but the words tangled into a whisper of a thought, unfinished. I just stayed there, breath shallow, watching her, feeling the almost. Then the door creaked again. A sound from the hallway this time. She startled, stepping back just enough to end the invisible line we had almost crossed. I swallowed, trying to anchor myself in the sudden normalcy. The mug trembled slightly in my hand. I didn't move it, didn't move myself, just sat there, heartbeat loud, knowing the moment had passed, but also knowing it had changed everything. The hallway smelled faintly of rain, wet cement, and the faint perfume she always wore. I hadn't planned to see her that evening, but the way she appeared near the stairs made my chest tighten anyway. "You're late," she said, almost casual, but there was an edge in her voice I couldn't place. Work ran over," I muttered, shifting my weight from one foot to the other. I wanted to say more, to explain, to apologize, but the words felt heavy, too heavy for this small space. We walked in silence, side by side. The city lights outside the window glimmered faintly on the wet pavement below. I wanted to reach for her hand, just lightly, but she stepped a fraction closer to the wall, subtly closing the distance between us in a way that reminded me she still had control. "I saw him today," she said finally, voice low, almost too quiet. My stomach dropped. Him, her ex, maybe someone I wasn't supposed to think about. She didn't look at me when she said it, just kept walking, letting her words hang. "Oh," I said, nothing else coming. I wanted to ask her why, what it meant, but I swallowed it all. Her pace slowed. We ended up on the small bench near the lobby window. She sat first, fingers resting lightly on her knees. I hesitated before sitting, aware that proximity felt heavier than ever. The quiet between us stretched, and I noticed the way her eyes kept flicking toward the reflection of the street outside, then back to me, almost accusing, almost searching. "I shouldn't," she started, then stopped. A pause, a breath. "I shouldn't feel," another pause. She looked at me, and for one fraction of a second, I saw something raw in her eyes. Fear, maybe guilt, maybe desire all tangled together. I wanted to reach for her, to say it first. "I like you. I want this. I don't care what it is." But the words were trapped behind my throat. Instead, I leaned slightly closer, just enough to notice the faint warmth radiating from her coat, the scent of rain on her hair, the curve of her shoulder in the soft light. "I don't know what you want from me," she said finally. Her voice shook slightly, almost imperceptibly. I could hear the careful control she usually held over herself slipping, and it made my chest ache. I don't know either," I whispered. Not a confession exactly, but enough to leave the question hanging. My hand hovered near hers on the bench, trembling a fraction. Her eyes met mine for a long moment. Then she leaned back, crossing her arms lightly, pulling herself inward, just enough to create distance. My pulse slowed, my fingers tightened around the sleeve of my jacket. The air between us thickened, heavy with unsaid words, almost touch, almost truth. The rain outside tapped gently against the window. I didn't move. Neither did she. The quiet was almost unbearable, electric with everything we weren't saying. And then she asked, or maybe just thought it, "Are you sure about this?" I wanted to answer. I wanted to speak. But all I could do was sit there, frozen, aware that something was about to change, and that once it did, there might be no turning back. The next day, I found her note slipped under my door. Just a scrap of lined paper, handwriting tight, careful. "Sorry. I can't today. Maybe later." I stared at it for a long time, folding and refolding it. Her apartment felt empty in its absence, but the hallway smelled faintly of the rain from yesterday, and I kept expecting her to appear at the end of the stairs, a half smile, a question in her eyes. She didn't. Later, at the corner cafe, I saw her across the street, talking to someone I didn't recognize. A man older than me, but younger than her, well-groomed, hands moving as he spoke. My chest clenched for a second before I reminded myself I shouldn't assume. Still, her laughter, soft, quiet, full of warmth, wasn't meant for me that day. I sipped my coffee, noticing the way the foam had cooled, and felt a twist in my chest. Not jealousy exactly, maybe curiosity or fear. And then I realized something else. She hadn't mentioned him. Not once. Not a word about who might be waiting in her life, what boundaries existed. I tried to imagine the conversation that had just happened, how ordinary, how intimate it might have been. My hand brushed the edge of the cup, curling around it tighter than necessary. I spent the afternoon walking aimlessly, checking my phone every few minutes. Draft messages piled up. Are you okay? Do you want to meet later? I can come by if you. And each one I deleted before sending. Each one a reminder that she had pulled back, and I had no map for why. When I returned to my apartment, the hallway felt narrower, the stairs quieter, the building older than it had yesterday. I paused by the lobby window, imagining her sitting on the bench, alone, maybe thinking of me, or maybe not. The thought made my chest both ache and tighten at once. I remembered the briefest glimpse of her ex, or someone who seemed like one, and a small pang of uncertainty. Not guilt, not heartbreak, just pause. Everything frozen in the air between us. I sat on the couch, my phone in my lap. My thumb hovered over the new message I wanted to send. Do you want to talk? And then I didn't. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. Outside, rain began to fall again, light at first, then steady. I left the window cracked just enough to hear it. It felt like something in me was waiting for her, waiting for an answer I wasn't ready to receive, waiting for the next fragment of this half-lived story. And yet, I knew the bench would be empty tonight. Her cup would be missing. Her hand would not brush mine. I folded another note I wouldn't send, slipped it back into the drawer, and leaned back, listening to the quiet, hoping it would tell me something. I found her on the fire escape, perched on the metal steps with a mug in her hands, the evening light slanting over her hair. The city smelled faintly of wet asphalt and exhaust. I hesitated at the door, unsure if I should knock or just turn around and leave. You came, she said without looking at me, voice soft, almost a statement rather than a greeting. I wasn't sure if I should, I admitted, shifting from foot to foot. My hands fidgeted with the hem of my jacket. She sipped her tea and let out a quiet sigh. I'm glad you did. We sat in silence, side by side. The metal steps were cold beneath me, and I felt in my spine, grounding me. I wanted to reach for her hand, wanted to speak first, wanted to risk saying everything I've been holding back for weeks. But I stayed still, letting the pause stretch, because I could feel the weight of what might be lost if I crossed the line too quickly. I didn't know if you'd come after yesterday, she said finally, turning slightly toward me. Her eyes caught mine for a moment, unsure, hesitant. I thought maybe it was too much. Too much. I whispered. My voice sounded small even to me. I just didn't know what you wanted. She let a small laugh escape, soft and uneven. Neither did I, she admitted. And then, almost like she was testing the air, she added, but maybe I wanted you to stay anyway. My chest tightened. That phrase, so small, so understated, carried more weight than any words I could have conjured. I leaned slightly closer, careful not to push, careful to let her retreat if she chose. I started and stopped. Everything tangled. Hope, guilt, longing. I wanted to tell her everything, but the risk of losing her entirely stopped me. Instead, I let my words trail off, letting the space between us speak for me. Her hand shifted slightly, brushing against mine, and I froze, not pulling away but not moving closer either. It was enough. Just enough. A tentative connection, human and quiet. We stayed like that for a while, watching the lights of the city blink on, listening to the faint hum of traffic below. Each pause carried its own meaning, each glance a careful negotiation of distance and closeness. Finally, she tilted her head, letting her hair fall forward, and said softly, "Okay." Not a promise, not a declaration, just a simple word, small and human. But it felt like something between us had finally been named, however lightly, however carefully. I nodded, feeling the weight of the weeks, the unsent messages, the almosts, the pauses settle into a quiet kind of peace. My fingers brushed hers once more, accidental, deliberate, and I stayed still, letting the warmth linger. No words could capture it better than that single, soft okay. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were on the same page. even if just for a moment. Weeks passed. I stopped timing my visits, stopped counting the days since her last note. The hallway smelled faintly of polished wood instead of rain, and the lobby felt warmer, lived in a way I hadn't noticed before. One morning around 8:47 a.m., I found her leaning against the banister outside her door, black coffee in hand, just like she always did. I almost didn't say anything, but she smiled at me the way she had months ago, soft, knowing, familiar. I nodded and kept walking, but lingered at the top of the stairs, watching her for a moment longer than necessary. Later, she invited me in for tea. Not the quiet, tense tea of the past, but ordinary tea, the steam curling from the mug, a faint whiff of chamomile in the air. We sat on her couch, knees brushing, sharing small observations about the day, how the heater hummed, how a neighbor's dog barked too early, how a package had arrived for someone she didn't know. Nothing dramatic, nothing that felt like a confession, just life and somehow us folded into it. The bench in the lobby remained our unspoken marker. Some mornings we sat there briefly, coffee cups warm between our hands. I noticed the slight tilt of her head when she looked at me, and the way she stirred her tea, slow, deliberate. I realized I knew her routines now, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, the soft murmur she made when the city outside was too loud, the way she remembered the smallest things I mentioned weeks ago. I still sometimes thought about the nearly crossed lines, the drafts of unsent texts, the moments of hesitation that had stretched between us. But now they felt like shadows that had passed. We had survived them, quietly, and something more grounded had grown in the space they left behind. One evening, she reached for my hand as we climbed the stairs, fingers brushing like an ordinary act, but it meant everything. I didn't speak. She didn't speak. The city hummed softly outside, the lights flickered on the sidewalk, and for the first time in months, the quiet between us wasn't tension or almost. It was simple, human, earned. I poured myself black coffee one morning while she brewed her tea, and we laughed softly about nothing at all, the kind of laugh that lands in your chest and doesn't leave. Life was messy, routines shifted, deadlines came and went, people passed through the building. But somehow, in the middle of ordinary, we found a rhythm together. And when she looked at me later that day, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, I realized it wasn't about the nearlies or the pauses anymore. It was about knowing each other in the quietest way, the way only we could. I didn't need words. She didn't either. Some things, I thought, are meant to be understood without saying them. And that was enough.